what would you recommend that we can do? After the meditation, I went out for a walk, and what happened in the meditation, which was this merging of, I would say, consciousness with the sensation of whatever it was that we were exploring, and the seeing, the sensing, the being it one. As soon as I walked out, it all became separate again. Then the trees were there and I was here.
Yes.
What recommendation or guidance could you give us as to how, you said there's no how, but to make that the moment-to-moment reality?
Yes. A meditation like this morning dismantles the believed, and more than just the believed, the felt solidity and density and separation of our experience. It dissolves it, and you had that experience. Now, when the meditation comes to an end and we go off to lunch or go for a walk, we don't remain in that condition. Through force of habit, that there is a returning to the old patterns of thinking and feeling, in this case particularly feeling, but we don't go all the way back. And then we do a similar kind of meditation. Again, there is this dissolution of the sense of solidity, objectivity, otherness, density, particularly in the feeling of the body. The body feels pervaded by the light of awareness. It feels sensitive, light, weightless. But then, sure enough, 2 or 3 hours later, through force of habit, the old feelings have come back again. But again, we don't go all the way back. Something of the old way of feeling and perceiving, not just thinking, but feeling and perceiving. And that's why these yoga meditations are so powerful. They act on our feelings and perceptions, not our thoughts. Something of what we experienced in the meditation is retained. And part of the old way of feeling and perceiving has been dissolved. We never go all the way back again. So each time we come back to these kinds of yoga meditations, we are gradually eroding or erasing old habits of feeling, sensing and perceiving. In our conversations like this evening, we are exposing and eroding patterns of thought. And that is important. But in the meditations, particularly the yoga meditations, we are exposing and erasing old patterns of feeling, sensing and perceiving. And this is where the root of the separate self lies. The separate self doesn't just lie in our beliefs. The deeper and larger aspect of it is in our feelings in the body. And these feelings in the body are immune to non-dual conversation. They require a finer approach. And they are very tenacious. As I said this morning, these feelings have been laid down when the body was still soft and sensitive and open. And they were laid down deeply in the body, layer after layer, particularly early on in our childhood. And they have the separate self has, as it were, solidified in the body. And it's not just a couple of hours of a yoga meditation is not going to dissolve that density. We have to soak there. The image I sometimes use is the image of a kitchen, a tea cloth, that an old kitchen tea cloth that we've washed numerous times in the washing machine, and the washing machine gets 90% of the dirt out, but the wine stains and the tea stains remain. They are immune to Ajax and Persil, and there's another agent is required. So you put the tea towel in a tub of water. You need to leave it soaking in the soapy water. It's this soaking that affects the removal of this last 10%, the wine and the tea stains. So the wine and the tea stains are what seem to be these residues of separation in the body, the tea stains. And it is this soaking in these yoga meditations that is, to my knowledge, in my experience, the most penetrating and the most effective. And as I think I said sometime earlier this week, this approach was implicit in the Vedantic approach. For instance, Ramana Maharshi sat for many hours just in silence with his students. That he was doing this, but it was just a soaking in. When I say just a soaking in silence, it's very powerful. There was this soaking in silence, and these feelings gradually come up to the surface, layer upon layer, and they are dissolved. But in this approach, we are a little bit more proactive. As I said this morning, we're not actually doing anything to the body, but we are encouraging these tensions to come out of their hiding places in the body. And we are kind of lovingly teasing them out of their hiding places, and then we are leaving them to soak, or offering them to the transparent space of awareness. So it's a little bit more penetrating.
Working with negative emotions. Whenever we endeavor to sit down and really face ourself and be with ourself, which is the heart of meditation, we will encounter a whole array of experiences and emotions. Sometimes we'll experience a great peace or stillness or presence, sometimes a very open and spacious awareness, sometimes a very transcendent sense of freedom and well-being. At other times we'll enter into the more tumultuous quality of our experience. As our consciousness goes deeper and deeper into our being, at some point we begin to touch upon the more negative parts of our emotional experience. At some point we begin to find the courage and the openness to become present in the midst of our pain. And in this meditation, we're going to look at how to skillfully work with negative or painful emotions. Because the arising of a painful or negative emotion does not mean that you're meditating in a wrong way. In fact, it often means that you're now available and willing to touch a dimension of your experience that you may have hidden from or tried very hard not to experience. But in order to fully and deeply awaken, we must go through all the realms of human experience in order to arrive at the very ground of consciousness, at the divine ground of our being. We must be completely open and willing to experience anything that arises. So in this meditation, I'm going to guide you into how to be with emotions that are difficult to be with. Anger, sadness, sorrow, guilt, envy. Because when we learn how to be with these kinds of emotions, we can be part of what allows them to release themselves and for their raw energy to reintegrate into the entirety of our body minds. In other words, we can participate in freeing these negative emotions. It's important to understand in this meditation that you must let go of the attitude of trying to be free of negative emotions. If you're trying to be free of your emotion, then you're standing in opposition to it. You're trying to control it. Instead, what we're looking at is not how to be free of your emotion, but how to free a negative emotion itself. How to grant that emotion freedom for its own well-being and your own. So to begin with, as always in meditation, you take a moment to settle into the breath and into the body. Letting the breath become simple and fluid and rhythmic. Not controlling it, just letting it settle into itself. Letting the body be at ease. Now I want you to recall a common negative emotion for you. Whatever a common and negative emotion may be, just recall what it feels like. It'll probably be helpful when recalling a negative emotion to recall some of the narrative, because every negative emotion has a narrative to it, has a storyline to it. A storyline that's not only creating it, but continuing it through time. It could be something that happened this morning or yesterday or last week or last year or 10 years ago. Start with something small though, something that's not too big, too vast, until you get the hang of it, until you get some experience in how to deal with difficult emotions. Start with something that's relatively not intimidating. Just recall, what's one of your persistent negative emotions that you deal with? Anger, anxiety, perfectionism, unworthiness, The list of negative emotions is vast and long. And just allow yourself to feel it. And see if you can become aware, see if you can listen to the narrative in your mind, to the way your mind talks to itself in such a way that it keeps creating and recreating the emotion. The narrative is the old argument, the old judgment, the old opinion, the old resistance. Often people will say when they first look into this, they'll say, well, I have the feeling, I have an emotion, but I can't find the words to it, I can't find the narrative. In which case I say, just keep listening for it. It's there. You can be assured it's there. Some of our narratives and stories are conscious, and many of them are underneath the conscious level. And so we need to be patient for them to arise. But there is a narrative there. So feel whatever the emotion may be, whatever the sorrow may be, whatever the difficulty may be. Just have a willingness to feel the raw energy of it. Whether it's in your chest, or your gut, or anywhere else in your back, in your shoulders. Feel the energy of it. And once you can feel the emotion, once you can feel the energy of it, great or small, then you can begin to let go of the narrative. Let go of the storytelling for the moment and shift all your attention to the energy of the emotion itself, to the feeling of it in your body. Is the feeling intense? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it contracted? Or afraid, or defensive. These are all words, but they're actually living energies within our bodies. And any old emotional reaction, old emotional trigger or trauma, they get locked into our bodies when we have experienced something that we were incapable or unwilling to experience fully. So if you've had an upset, or a fear, or a sorrow that you weren't either able or willing to experience fully at the moment that it arose, it gets locked into your system. It gets stuck in time. Its cause may have been last week, or last year, or 50 years ago. But at the moment that you do not experience it fully and completely, you lock that emotion into your body. And it keeps circulating over and over and over, looking for release over and over. And every time you resist it, every time you judge it, every time you condemn it or deny it, you lock it into your system more and more deeply. So what I'm talking about now takes courage. It takes the courage to reverse this trend of avoiding, of denying, of going unconscious. And instead you're bringing full consciousness, or at least as much as you can in the moment. just bringing at least as much consciousness as you can in the moment to whatever emotion you feel. Letting go of its narrative, of its story, so that you can be absolutely intimate with the energy of it. Not move from it, not move in body, not move in mind, not move in spirit. Not be moved by the old story that continues it, but meet it directly and completely as you can. And feel where in your body the energy resides, where in your body does the emotion play itself out. And as you open to your emotion, as you open to your feeling, once you really begin to experience it, then you can ask yourself, what emotion or energy is deeper than this? What emotion or energy is deeper than this? Because our first conscious experience of most emotions is just the tip of the iceberg. It's the part that we will allow ourselves to see and experience. But it's generally hiding a deeper emotion that's more difficult for us to experience, an emotion that we're less willing to experience. So for instance, if you experience fear, if you allow yourself to experience fear without getting lost in the story, but just meeting that fear with great presence, great stability, and great love. And then if you ask yourself, what's deeper than this emotion, what's deeper than this experience, often the fear will then reveal what's underneath it, which is often a kind of sorrow. Sorrow is a more tender emotion than fear. Fear is protective and defensive. Sorrow is soft and vulnerable. And so you just allow yourself to experience that to whatever extent you can. You're not forcing anything upon yourself. You're just bringing great love and great care to your experience. You're not trying to break through it or get rid of it. That's the old egoic agenda that creates the problem in the first place. And as you open to the deeper layers of your emotion, you can keep asking, and what is the emotion or energy that is deeper than this? And allow your experience to unfold as deeply as it's ready to unfold. You feel this deeper energy in your body. And remember, you always have your breath. If your experience becomes too tumultuous, if you start to feel like yourself getting lost or too afraid, you can always just drop it and return to the breath. Return to the breath that's always there. That's like your anchor. And if your experience ever were to become too intense or too frightening, more than you felt like you were ready for, you can not only return to the breath, but you can also open your eyes and just look at the floor in front of you, reminding yourself where you are, that you're here sitting on the earth, and that the whole earth supports you, that it's holding you, that there is a great safety in being here. In knowing that your breath is always there, that the earth is underfoot, that you have a resource of stability within you. Because in doing this work, you don't want to push yourself. You've already been pushed too much into uncomfortable emotions. So you don't want to continue to push. You're just inviting a deeper unfolding. And as you open to the energy of each emotion, that energy, when you can fully experience it, that energy begins to let go at some point. Just because you're fully present to it, it begins to let go and reintegrate into your body, into your nervous system, bringing a deeper sense of calm. And during this process, you may get a flash of memory of where the emotion got started, of the event that precipitated this particular difficult experience. If you ever have those deeper flashes of understanding as to the origin of your experience arise, just let them arise. Receive the understanding. Don't analyze it. Don't make a new story about it. Just receive the understanding if and when it comes. And never think that it's final. Always be willing to see the next thing. And if you don't have any old memory come back or any understanding as to the origin of your experience, don't worry about it. Often you don't need to remember, you don't need to know. Often you just need to allow the energy to reintegrate into your system. It's a very soft and intimate dance between the compassionate heart and difficult emotional experience. And as you do this, over time, your experience and your capacity to contain deeper and deeper experience grows. So your capacity to hold all of your experiences becomes more solid, more stable. Your capacity to be open and present gets greater and greater. And although throughout some of these meditations I've showed you and introduce to you not only the idea, but the experience that the truth of your being is beyond any thought or feeling or emotion. The truth, the deepest, deepest ground of your being, transcends all experience. Even though that ground transcends all experience, we also have this human component. This human component which has its frailty, which has its imperfections. And the ground is not separate from your humanity. The ground is what frees your humanity. And in this meditation, we're really bringing the ground of your being together with your human emotion. And using that emotion in such a way that you can find a deeper and deeper sense of freedom and well-being. Eventually, all emotional experience opens into a great expanse of freedom, an expanse of consciousness. And by doing this work, you begin to close the gap between your deepest experience of freedom and well-being and your very human incarnate life. Now just let your attention relax from any experience. And let it settle just into the simple act of awareness, of being conscious. Feel how in your humanness, in your body, you feel just a bit lighter, a bit more clear. And let your whole system receive that deeper state of clarity and peace. And remember that this isn't just a meditation that you need to be sitting in stillness to do. But once you get the hang of it, once you practice it a bit, you can actually apply it any time, on the fly, in your life. When you have a difficult feeling, you can completely open to it. You can acknowledge its narrative and the story that creates and continues it. You can then let the story go and just focus on the experience. And what's the deeper experience than that? And let it all unfold into the expanse of the empty field of awareness. And now it delivers you back into the heart, into the clear and loving heart.